In my next video, I'm going to discuss the major timeline discrepancy. Welcome to Black History Decoded, where I give insight into Black or African history that has been misrepresented over the centuries. King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, aka Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye, are the parents of so-called Jesus, aka Amenhotep IV, aka Akhenaten. Now, we know the virgin birth story comes from Isis, right? Well, I already explained how the so-called virgin birth came about, and I'm going to explain it again for this video. Queen of Sheba goes to visit King Solomon, yada yada yada. She spends the night, and King Solomon tricks her and then sleeps with her. She goes back home, and she has a child. You could do your own research on the matter, but what I've noticed from the many videos I've watched on the subject, they make no mention that this was a huge problem for her. She had a child out of wedlock. That is a no-no in their culture. A very prominent queen goes to see the most powerful man in the world. He clearly likes her. The union of the two kingdoms would be very advantageous, but instead of tying the knot, getting him to marry her, she has sex with him, gets pregnant, and comes home without unifying the two kingdoms? You think her people are going to look favorably on her if they discover this? Absolutely not. So she has to come up with a plan to save face. She can only do one of two things: hide her pregnancy and then pretend to find the child outside the palace and adopt the child, or come up with another propaganda scheme by saying Osiris impregnated her, a divine birth. It obviously worked. Note that both those stories are in Egyptian history. Now, the virgin birth story is a fantastical story that a lot of people believed back then, and even to this day. This story would make her and her son larger than life, and we know that it has. But it was clearly propaganda in order to save her from embarrassment, and it worked. Isis, aka Queen of Sheba, was a very smart, intelligent, crafty woman. She eventually goes back to King Solomon, aka Amenhotep III, and gets him to marry her and claim their son. Evidence of this is in the mythology, but they're using King Solomon's other persona, or Amenhotep III's other persona, which is Ra, or Re.
Isis, and the name of the sun god. The Egyptians were firm believers in magic. The goddess Isis was considered to be especially potent in the magical arts, and one of her greatest coups came when she persuaded Re to divulge his secret name so that she held power over him. Isis was a clever woman, explained one story. More intelligent than countless gods, she was ignorant of nothing in heaven or on earth. She wanted to place herself and her son Horus at the head of the pantheon of gods, and the only way to do this was to discover Re's secret name. One day Isis came upon Re when he was asleep, snoring loudly. From the corner of his open mouth hung a long dribble of saliva, which gathered weight and fell to the ground. Isis pounced. Scooping up the spittle, she mixed it with clay in the form of a poisonous snake. Then she breathed magic into the snake to make it come alive. Isis had noted Re's movements and knew that every so often he would leave his palace to go for a walk. Each time on his route, he passed a crossroads. Isis left her snake there and awaited further developments. Re emerged for his excursion, and as Isis had planned, the snake bit him. Re saw nothing, but he felt the poison coursing through him. In pain, he called to the 9 gods of the Ennead for help. Re had a fever and was sweating and shivering, but the other gods were helpless. They could do no more than mourn the impending loss of the sun. Isis then made a dramatic entrance. She could cure him, she said, but only if he would tell her his name. Re refused. She offered again and again, but still he declined. Eventually his agony became so extreme that he could bear it no longer, and he agreed to give Isis the secret on condition that she should tell it to no one other than her son Horus. Isis accepted these terms, and speaking aloud the god's true name, she removed the poison. The sun god was cured at once, and Isis and Horus attained the power that they had sought.
The Hathor temple was specifically designed to legitimize this elevation in status of herself and son. The Hathor temple was not built by the Ptolemies. So everything about the Ptolemies and Cleopatra VII has to be put into question. Now I asked this of Google. What is the Hathor temple known for? It was built during the Ptolemaic era, which I proved that that's not the case, that's a lie, and is dedicated to the goddess Hathor and her son Horus. Now, gods and goddesses, they're actual people. So Hathor is the mother of Horus. So Hathor and Isis are the same person. That's another name for Queen of Sheba, or that's another name for Isis, is Hathor. The temple is well known for its beautiful reliefs and sculptures depicting various gods and goddesses who are actual people. The temple was built to commemorate the birth of Horus, the god of kingship, born from Hathor's womb in Dendera. Now, translation. The temple was built to commemorate the birth of so-called Jesus, the god of kingship, born from Hathor's womb in Dendera. Hathor, aka Isis, aka Queen Tiye, aka Queen of Sheba, and who impregnated her? Well, King Solomon, aka Amenhotep III, aka Re. So we know the virgin birth story is a so-called Jesus story, and the parents of so-called Jesus are King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, aka Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye. Once you understand this, now it makes sense why so-called Jesus is so renowned around the entire world. It's because of his parents, but specifically his mother. The mother is always the backbone, right? Like, share, subscribe, and make a comment. Thanks.